teachers, colleagues, pianists, and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Notturno or Nocturne by Edvard Grieg. This is Opus 54, number 4 from his lyric pieces. And it sounds like this. Wonderful piece and one that I love teaching for a lot of reasons. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. I've seen a few questions in piano teacher forums recently about finding romantic or lyrical or very expressive pieces appropriate for intermediate students who are on their way to playing more advanced repertoire. And I really think Grieg's lyric pieces are fabulous examples of that at a variety of levels. We have some more early intermediate, plenty at the mid-intermediate level, and then this one and others at the late intermediate level. To that end, I have multiple videos covering other lyric pieces, so if you click up there in the corner or look in the description of this video, you'll find videos for Puck, Watchman Song, Sailor Song, and more. But one of the reasons that I specifically love this one is that I think this is a great piece as a preparation for Debussy's Clair de Lune. There are so many similarities. The time signature is the same. It's 9/8 with these, big 3 beats in a measure divided into 3. While Clair de Lune doesn't have actually any polyrhythms between the hands, it does play with the duple versus triple division of the beat, which this piece definitely has. The melody frequently goes into duples. And for this one, you also have to work with the polyrhythm between the hands. It's also just got a very similar ethos. The idea of a nocturne, a night piece. This is a very, very evocative piece with even maybe a nightingale singing with those little trill parts. So the idea of preparing a student for Debussy for that very evocative, impressionistic music, again, I just think this is a fabulous piece in preparation for that. That's just a little bit easier and can work on technical, rhythmic, and other musical skills that are involved for preparing for that. Even though we don't think of Grieg as an impressionist, it works really well for that. To that end, I am currently working on a brand new resource for piano teachers and pianists. It's going to be called Not Ready Yet. I'm going to take 10 of students' most requested pieces, things like Clair de Lune, Fiorelise, Rondo alla Turca, the Rachmaninoff C-sharp minor prelude. You know the ones that students come in and they say, I want to play this piece. And when your student is not ready to play something that technically or musically difficult, it often causes quite a conundrum of what should I do to encourage my students' enthusiasm and yet not give them something that they truly are not ready to handle. So if you'd like to be the first to know about that resource, please click the link in the description of this video and enter your email address so you can be the first to know when it's ready. All right, this is going to be the first in 2 videos. I'm going to, for the rest of this video, just talk about rhythm, handling polyrhythms, how do we play this piece, and in the second video I'm going to talk about everything else. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you can have access to that video next week. So let's talk about the rhythm. This piece is in 9/8 time, as I mentioned, with a brief little period in 6/8 time. And compound meter, anything with an 8 on the bottom, are larger beats of dotted quarter notes that are then usually subdivided into 3s, which we find very clearly at the beginning. We have 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a. You certainly can count that in 9 to make sure your student understands 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the way this meter works is those larger beats. And if you were conducting any kind of ensemble, you would be conducting this in 3. Now it is slow, it's andante, but it would still be overly pedantic to conduct this in 9. It would not work very well. So students need to already have plenty of experience in compound meter at this point and really just understanding. You could certainly do some movement in your studio or conducting or basic verbal counting, 1 and 2 and 3 and just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then make sure your student understands, again, this is just the baseline prerequisites, that they can take that same beat and instead of thinking 1 and 2 and, they can split it into duples. 1 and 2 and 3 and. And when I'm first sending a student home with this, we're going to make sure that they can do that 1 and 2 and 3 and versus 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3. So that's the baseline, being able to subdivide into 3s and 2s. And then we can start dealing with the polyrhythm. So the left hand throughout is holding down that triple division. The problem is that there are ties. And so for many things that include ties that make the beats or the bar lines ambiguous, I recommend practicing without the ties first. In other words, you replay the note that you would normally tie, hold in the tie. So if we look at measure 5, you can practice the left hand with every beat playing. So that then when you start working on this polyrhythm, you're not doing it with the extra complication of the ties. Now, hopefully your student, in fact, I would say it would be mandatory that your student has already experienced 2 against 3 polyrhythms before they play this piece. Even if they have, you might just do a little basic review of tapping that rhythm to get it back in. Sometimes it's easier to actually do it a little faster, let it really flow. And then I always teach polyrhythms in scales before we encounter them in repertoire. So B major has the easiest scale fingering, so I would have my student do that and then review it before playing this piece. Any student of mine who's played this has already done this scale. It's not new at this point. Since the duples are in the right hand and the triplets are in the left hand, we are going to start the right hand 2 octaves above, and then they will meet at the top. This so many times, I can tell you that the experience is when students first do this, they look at me like, there is no way I'm going to be able to do this. It sounds terrible. It's really hard to get my fingers coordinated. And then they work on it for a couple weeks and they get it, and it becomes something that they can easily flow through. It is dissonant because our ears are not used to this minor second right there on the second big beat. So I also always send my students home with a recording. I just play it either on their phone or I send them a Google Drive recording of just the audio, and I tell them to listen to it because listening to it is part of the absorbing the polyrhythm and also just being willing to play the scale in that way. So once my student can do that, they've already come into this piece with that experience, then we can take a look at places like measure 5 and measure 7 without the ties because they have that polyrhythm experience. And you notice I also took out the grace notes because again, that makes the beat a little bit ambiguous or plays with that rhythm. That's one of the reasons that WC is so beloved and so difficult to play, is that it's all this ambiguity of rhythm. And the same is true here, which is again is why I think this is a great prep for Clair de Lune. So then once your student can play those 4 measures well like that, then you can add the ties back in. They still have to just know where those big beats are. So you can play the E from measure 4 ahead of time and then start 1, 2, 3, 1. Going from there. It gets more complicated once you hit measure 9 because now the right hand is doing both that duple melodic content on top and the triple accompaniment pattern. So what I stress with my students when they play this piece is that the right hand bottom notes are actually part of the left hand's part. They are part of the accompaniment, and we practice it that way. So I'm going to play just the left hand at measure 9 plus the right hand accompanimental notes. be quite easy to do. I would recommend even just memorizing that so that it's there, you don't have to think about it. And then you can go back in and add that polyrhythm melody. This takes quite a bit of work, and it takes quite a bit of listening on the part of your student as well as for you. If the polyrhythm doesn't sound right, you have to diagnose exactly what's wrong. Are they elongating the first note, or are they elongating the last note? In my experience, usually with polyrhythms, the triplets are not even, and the first note is not usually emphasized enough. That's why when I'm first teaching triplet rhythms for students, in much easier repertoire than this, I like to use the words blueberry, blueberry, or hamburger, hamburger, or any other word that emphasizes that first syllable very strongly, because that's how you will get an effective triplet rhythm, rather than blueberry or da-da-da, da-da-da. I just want to stress one more time that rhythmic preparation is so important in intermediate and upper intermediate repertoire, certainly in advanced repertoire, to the point where this piece cannot be the vehicle for your student learning this rhythm. They have to have had experience with this before. It's our job to proactively teach those things at a variety of levels. If you're looking for another Grieg piece that has this idea of the polyrhythm in one hand with the accompaniment, there's also a lovely piece called Elegy, which is Opus 38, number 6. I just taught this piece for the first time, and it has duple divisions in the left hand. With a duple division in the right hand until the last beat, which has a triplet. So that piece is worth checking out as well. Lastly, in regards to this rhythmic division and just the rhythmic nature of this piece, balancing the melody over the accompaniment does become an issue, partly because there's just a lot of accompanimental notes, so it's just a battle of how many notes, but it's also that idea that the right hand is doing both the melody and the accompaniment. So this is something you'll very much have to work with your students about. They need to be convinced to play very lightly with their right hand thumb, with a nice, heavy, full arm weight pinky on top. I used to have a teacher who would say steel pinky. We think of our pinkies as being kind of puny and wimpy on the top of our hand here, but that it was very well supported, not stiff, just very, very strong. I heard another piano teacher say that she had a teacher who would say bloody pinky, like you're just really going for it, with passion with your pinky on top. And while the dynamic at measure 9 is piano, this melody does soar up to forte at measure 12 with an accent. So that might be a bloody pinky moment for your student. So really listening for this top. And then when you add the left hand back in, the left hand is similarly very light. You can try ghost practice. Fake practice, where you're faking the accompaniment, you're ghosting the accompaniment, and then you allow it to just come back in just barely enough that you can hear it. And this is where, depending on the student's age, level, ability, experience, and amount that they listen, some students will be able to achieve a pretty high level of this, and others will really struggle. As long as our vision as the teacher is very clear in how beautiful we want to hear that balance out, and how much we are working with our student to give them actual practice techniques to try to improve it. Not all students will reach the same level of achievement, as I said, but all of them can make some sort of progress in getting closer to that vision that we have for that melody balanced against the accompaniment. All right, I hope that gave you some great tips to start working on the Nocturne by Edvard Grieg, particularly on the area of rhythm. This, like so many other pieces, is supposed to sound beautiful and almost out of time. It's just this serene piece. And yet we do have to start from a place of very clear rhythmic understanding. Our students need to not just feel it out, but understand what's going on rhythmically so that they can then start from that place of core understanding and play expressively. Make sure you're subscribed and look out for next week's video where I will talk about all of the other concerns in this piece. Thanks so much for watching. Best wishes in your teaching and playing.